Welcome to this free Blender Environments Beginners course. During this 1-hour tutorial, you will be learning all the essentials of making 3D environments in Blender. If you would like to learn everything about making 3D environments like a pro, head to skillademia.com and get access to the full course. Now, let's begin.
Hello and welcome to the Blender Environments course. My name is Emily and I'm going to be your instructor for this course. I have been developing in Blender for nearly a decade now and I'm happy to be here to share my passion for creating environments with you. In this course, we are going to build this environment that you see right here from start to finish. I will walk you through the entire process from initial concepts through blocking out in 3D, modeling, texturing, and finally to lighting and rendering to get those final portfolio shots. This course is going to be somewhat fast-paced as we have a very limited amount of time to cover a lot of content, but I try to keep things as beginner-friendly as possible. So as long as you have the drive and are willing to put in the work, I know you all will build something really great. We have a lot to cover, so without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so before we dive right in and start building out our environment, I want to take some time to talk about environment art conceptually and explain a little bit about how environment artists think about the spaces that they want to create. Environments are present in all storytelling mediums, from novels to film to games, but maybe you have asked yourself, why do they matter? After all, stories are about the characters and the actions that they take. Why do we even need to spend the time creating elaborate backgrounds for them? Now, the answer is context. Although characters are the highlight of any narrative experience, without context, their actions and stories are meaningless. Take this example here. We have our character, Squidward, but what can we tell about him without further context? Well, he appears to be calm, he's smiling, and he's wearing a hat. But without more information, we don't know where he is, what he is doing, or what he is thinking or feeling about the situation. Now, when we add our environment, suddenly this image tells a whole story. We have Squidward here. It's the same character drawing. But now we know where he is, an art classroom. We know what he is doing. He's teaching a class. And we know that he feels happy and maybe a little smug about it. So really, when you break down scenes, especially those in a visual medium, we can see that the environments are really doing a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to storytelling. Environments set the stage for the characters and put their personalities, relationships, and actions into context. So let's talk about how 3D environments are designed. Most scenes use what is known as modular design. The modular approach to environment design involves breaking down a scene into repeatable component parts. Now, this is done for efficiency, both for the artist, as less time is spent making bespoke pieces, and for the machine that it is being rendered on, as instancing the same object multiple times across a scene is more performant than rendering the same number of unique assets. Now, this example here is the CCA subway scene by Clinton Krempler. And we can tell this scene is modular in its design because we have a lot of repeating elements here that are using the same 3D meshes and textures. And just to illustrate this, I've done a quick draw over of just a few of the repeating elements here. So we have everything highlighted in red is the same chair texture, everything in yellow is the same pole texture, the doors, the windows, the lights on the top, and so on. So when we break it down this way, we can see that this scene is actually very efficient in its design, as the artist only had to make one of each of these highlighted pieces and then just essentially copy and pasted them to build out the entirety of the scene. Let's look at another example here of some student work of a modular environment. Here, it is easier to see which elements repeat, such as the chairs, the arches in the back, the sconces on the wall, the flower pots. And we can also see from this image that this scene is somewhat large in scale for an interior. But here is the kit that comprised that opera house scene. 3D artists will typically make what is known as a kit, consisting of individual mesh pieces that either the same artist or a level designer in some cases will take and use to build out the final scene. As you can see, the kit here is quite small given the scale of the room. The entirety of it was built with just really a handful of mesh pieces. So even a large scene can be made up of relatively few modules if there is strong repetition in the scene and the modules are well planned. Let's look at another example here. This example is of a very simple modular scene made in Blender. We will not be recreating this scene exactly. However, this is probably the scale of what we will be working on during the course because our time is somewhat limited. If you want to continue to develop your scene after the course is over, you are encouraged to do so. However, a small finished scene is much better on a portfolio than a sweeping vista that is half finished. So just keep that in mind. Here are the modules that made up that last scene. For this course, especially if this is your first time making a complete scene, aim for no more than 50 individual mesh pieces. If you plan a scene that has many more pieces than this, I encourage you to think about ways you can limit the scope to something more achievable. For instance, if you want to do it like an entire village, that is great, but it's probably a little out of scope for an individual project, especially if you're more of a beginner. I recommend limiting it to a single building's interior or a narrow alleyway or something of that nature. You can always add more to your scene later if you want to expand, but just work on getting that vertical slice finished first. So let's quickly discuss the types of scenes. There are two major categories of environment scene, interior and exterior. Now, while these may be self-explanatory as to what they are, let's try to look at it through the lens of creating environment art. An interior, such as the example we have from Skyrim here, is an environment that is inside a building, a cave, or some other enclosed limited space. They tend to be smaller than the exteriors and somewhat easier to control the final look of. We also have exterior scenes, such as this one from Breath of the Wild. They are representative of the outside world. They make up the majority of space in open world games. Filling up vast exteriors is generally more advanced work that requires some special considerations depending on your goals for the scene. So let's talk about some of the considerations right now. The first thing to consider is scope. Scope is the most important aspect of project planning, as it is very easy to ambitiously plan a large-scale project only to experience burnout halfway through it and end up not finishing it. Exterior kits such as this one are typically a little bit bigger as there is more space to fill in an exterior scene. This kit is by Laertes Studios. It is the Cyberpunk Environment Pack and it is available on flippednormals.com. Interior kits are typically a little bit smaller, although this is not always the case, as a cluttered room with hundreds of unique objects would be a larger kit than an open vista with just a few tree or rock models. But it is generally easier to contain the scope of an interior scene because there is generally less space to fill. This kit is by Experience Points Studio. It is called The Lab, and it is also available on Flipped Normals. Now, the second thing we want to consider is draw distances. In interior scenes, typically all the objects are loaded at once because the scope of the scene is limited enough that everything can be rendered in real time without too much of a performance hit for the PC. However, it is not possible for computers to load every 3D object in a game at the same time. So developers have created a method for culling objects that are not visible to the camera in order to increase real-time rendering performance. This is highly effective for objects that are behind the camera, but when working with exteriors, having long sight lines, such as this one in this example, can mean that more objects need to be rendered onto the screen at the same time. Now, to combat the performance hit that this causes, developers will employ special techniques such as implementing LODs, which stands for levels of detail, to run the renderer more smoothly at a higher frame rate. So unless you are familiar with these techniques already, these types of scenes are best avoided if you're just starting out to creating environment art. This scene is from A Boy and His Kite. It is by Epic Games, and it is available for download on the Unreal Engine Marketplace. So the last thing that we really need to consider is lighting. Lighting differs dramatically based on whether you choose an interior or an exterior scene. Exterior scenes often use what is called a directional light to mimic the sun, whereas interiors are usually lit from sources within the scene itself, such as light bulbs and torches. Now, depending on your target platform, exteriors may require a dynamic lighting setup that allows the lighting to change from day to night. This is less of a concern in interior scenes. Now, with all of these things in mind, we are actually going to be creating an exterior scene for this course. Now, despite the fact that exterior scenes are slightly more advanced, I think we're all up to the challenge, and this course will cover the basics that would be applicable to an interior scene, but we're going to take a few extra steps to look at some exterior specific cases. So we are still going to limit the scope to something small and manageable for the sake of the course, but I highly encourage you, once you are done with the course, to continue to develop your scenes to make them your own, because that is really what is going to make them stand out. So here is how this course is going to break down. It's going to be project-based, so we will spend the entirety of the course working on a single scene from start to finish. The first thing we're going to do is going to be pre-production and planning. We're going to break down our concepts and our references into a modular design plan. We will then block out this design with simple shapes in Blender, and we will also, in this part, be going over some of the basics of Blender for those of you who are not familiar with it. And then from there, we will go on to add detail to our geometry with modeling. After that, we are going to apply materials and textures to those models. And finally, we're going to set up some basic lighting, and then we will talk about how to get those final portfolio-worthy renders. So that is the plan for the course. And in the next video, we are going to be talking about planning our scene. So let's get started. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about how environment artists think about their scenes, let's talk a little bit about planning them. Now, there are several things to consider when initially planning your scene. And we touched on a few of these in the last video, but let's dive a little bit deeper here. We talked about scope a bit in the previous video when we discussed interior versus exterior scenes. However, even though we have already settled on an exterior scene, we still need to think about scope here. Now, I'm going to use some more generic examples in this video rather than talking about our specific scene, because I want to really illustrate that these are design principles that apply to any type of environment. So remember that we want to keep our kit to no more than 50 unique pieces. So we need to think about what type of space is going to allow us to do that. Say you wanted to create a supermarket. Now, while this does have a lot of repeating elements, you would need to create hundreds of unique assets to fill the entirety of this store. So there are a few ways to scale this idea down somewhat. One very popular method is to create an abandoned supermarket, like something you might see in a Fallout game, such as the example pictured here. Most of the shelves here are empty from looting, and the store is in disarray. Not only does this reduce the need for hundreds of unique products to fill out the shelves, but it also adds an element of storytelling that a functioning supermarket might not have. If your project allows for it, another method for reducing scope is to focus on one segment of a greater area and only create and render that one section, say a single narrow aisle of the store or a single display case. However, you may need to do some additional work in world building to create storytelling elements in a more generic space such as this one. So what makes a good candidate for a modular scene? First, it needs to have repeating elements. Now, we did touch on this a bit already. We want our scene to feel larger than it really is by using duplicate objects from a relatively small kit to fill out a larger space. It needs to be contained, meaning you don't have long sight lines that you have to fill out with an infinite number of objects. You should have a clear idea of where your scene stops. And lastly, opportunity for storytelling. Keep in mind that environments, whether or not you plan incorporating them into a larger project, should tell a story. You could have the most beautifully rendered and technically clean scene that is possible, but if there are no storytelling elements, the likelihood that this scene is going to catch someone's eye is very low. Basically, don't make a boring scene. Now, we can brainstorm our storytelling elements by asking ourselves the W questions. First up is who. Who uses this space? Is it public or private? Is it the small private study of a reclusive wizard, or is it a football stadium filled with thousands of fans? Thinking about the characters that might inhabit your spaces can start to make the environments come to life. Next is what. What is the purpose or function of this space? What do the users do in it? Do they run through a challenging obstacle course in this space, or sit in quiet contemplation by the window? How does this function affect the form of the room? What types of spaces and objects are needed for this environment to function as intended? Where? Where is this environment in relation to the world around it? Is it in the middle of an Arizona desert? Is it in the frozen Antarctic? How does this change the lighting and the types of objects that you might find in the room? When? What period of time does this space exist in? If it's an Old West saloon, how will that differ from a modern dive bar? Why? Why do the inhabitants of this space need to use it? If it's the wizard's study, why is he using it? What is he working on? How can we communicate that to the viewer in a scene absent of actual characters? And lastly, how? Now, this is something you should ask yourself after each of the previous questions, as I did for those examples. How does the form of the space inform the answers to who is using it for what purpose, where, when, and why? Now, if you can answer all of these questions about your space, you likely have a good candidate for a 3D scene, at least from the storytelling aspect of it. So you've got an idea for an environment. What now? Well, before we begin building anything, we need to do even more planning. Now, the best way to build a compelling scene in 3D is to start with a compelling concept. Now, we have sort of a concept in that we have a rough idea of what our scene is going to be, but we need visual concepts in order to make it look convincing. Now, if you are new to environment art or you feel that your 2D painting skills are not especially strong, I do recommend you use work from professional concept artists to inform your scenes. Not only will you have a stronger finished piece, but you will also learn a lot about what makes for good environment design by studying the work of professionals. Now, there are several places that you can source concept art for your personal pieces. I recommend ArtStation, which, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is an online platform for artists to host their portfolios. Another great source of concepts is Pinterest. I personally use this more for finding photographs, as the quality of the images does tend to be better than a standard Google image search, although that, of course, is always an option for you as well. Now, if you feel you are more advanced in design or you come from a 2D art background, you may consider creating an original design for your concept. Basically, all this is creating your own drawings or paintings of your scenes, which will give you more concrete ideas on composition, framing, lighting, and mood for your scene. One popular method for concept artists to speed up their workflow is to use 3D paintovers. A 3D paintover is essentially a method for creating 2D environment concepts. It begins with an artist forming a rough block out of the scene in a 3D program, such as Blender, then taking a still image of that scene, bringing it into a 2D image editing software, such as Photoshop, and literally painting the details over it to form the finished concept. This saves the concept artist a lot of time trying to get the perspective right, as the 3D rendering program will automatically put everything into proper perspective based on the camera angle. This allows the artist to focus their energy on really nailing the details, the colors, and the mood of the scene without having to worry about the technical aspects of drawing in perspective. Okay, so once we have our overall concept, we can begin breaking it down into its modular elements. I recommend starting with a color-coded draw over, such as the one I have here. From there, you can start to compile a list of all the pieces that you're going to need to make. So in this example here, I would write a list of every piece I have highlighted here. Now, for the sake of clarity, I did not highlight things like the actual wall and floor pieces, but these should be included in your list. Once you have an idea of what assets you will need to make for your scene, it is time to start gathering additional references. Now, regardless of where you source your concepts, you are going to need to gather additional resources and references of specific objects that you plan to build for your scene. While concept art is great for giving the general idea of the environment, it is somewhat limited in that we can only view the concept art from one angle. Whereas when building a 3D asset for your scene, we need to build all sides of it. So gather as much reference as you can, both of entire scenes that are similar to the one you are creating and of individual objects within your scene. The more reference you have, the better you can make decisions about your objects and their placement in your environment. Once you have started to gather reference images, you are going to want a way to organize them so you can quickly reference the images you need while working in Blender. Personally, I prefer to use a program called PureRef. This is a free software that you can download from the PureRef website. And basically what it does is gives you a blank canvas onto which you can drag and drop your images and organize them in a free-form way. I'm going to demonstrate how this works in a future video. Another solid option here is to use Pinterest. I mentioned Pinterest is a good place to source concepts and references, but if you make a free account, you can also save any images on the site to boards, which you can organize in any way you please. The result is a board somewhat like those made through PureRef, but Pinterest has the advantage of being online and browser-based, so you can access them from any device, whereas PureRef boards will be saved locally to whatever machine you are using. Now, if you are averse to either of these methods, you can always just save images to a folder on your hard drive. However, it may make organization a little bit more difficult. You cannot view your images side by side in a sort of mood board format, the way that the other two options allow you to do. No matter how you choose to source and organize your references, the key takeaway here is that reference gathering is not optional. If you don't believe me, go try to draw a leaf right now, as realistically as you possibly can without looking at a reference. And you'll quickly realize that you've never really looked at a leaf before. So reference gathering is an absolute must, and believe me when I say that no professional artist works without reference. All right, the last subject I want to touch on in this video is about staying organized. Now, staying organized in a project of this scale can be a task in and of itself. I do recommend you sort out how you want to keep track of your progress, though, because it will make it really clear what steps you need to take next at any given point in your project. It's very easy to sort of lose track of what you were doing midway through a large project, but keeping written notes about your plan will help you stay on track and stay motivated. Additionally, if your goal is to become a professional environment artist, staying organized is really important for keeping track of your deliverables and gives you a better indication of how long certain aspects of the project will take for you to communicate to your clients. Now, there are many ways to go about keeping track of your progress. Personally, I like to use Trello. It is a free web-based service for managing projects of any type. You will need to make an account, but as I said, the basic features of it are free to use. It's also particularly good for team projects as it is online, and anyone that is part of the project can see and track the progress of other members of the team. That being said, I imagine most of you taking this course are working independently, so use whatever organizational method works best for you. Just try to be consistent within the project and make sure you are actually record your updates to it. Otherwise, it becomes quickly meaningless. So that is all I really wanted to cover in this video about planning and staying organized. In the next video, we are going to come back and actually do sort of a live demo on planning and reference gathering.
Hi again! Congrats on getting this far! I hope you're enjoying the course and already see great results. If you want to check out the extended version of the course, go to skillodemia.com where you will find our full Blender Environments Beginner to Advanced course with more than 90 lectures and many more projects to complete. Now, let's continue.
All right, so welcome to our reference gathering and planning live demo. So now we're finally going to start talking about what we're going to be building for our scene. Now, I'm going to be building a scene. You are welcome to follow along and build exactly what I'm building, or you're welcome to take this in a completely different direction and do your own thing. It really doesn't matter. You know, as long as you're using the principles and stuff and following along with this, you can make whatever type of scene you want. So here I am, I'm just on the ArtStation homepage right here because we're gonna start looking for some concept images for our scene. So we know that we wanna do an exterior so that we can cover some more advanced types of assets such as foliage and things of that nature. And at the time of this recording, we're getting sort of into fall here, and in the US at least, Halloween is coming up. And I love Halloween, so let's make a Halloween themed scene. So I think for our scene here, we're gonna do sort of like a spooky but not scary graveyard. It's probably gonna be a little bit more stylized. So let's just go about searching for some good reference and concept images. So I'm just on ArtStation again here. I'm just gonna search in the search bar, spooky graveyard, and see what comes up. All right, so right away we get a lot of nice hits here. Now I do have a rough idea of what I want this scene to consist of. But if you don't necessarily, looking at concept art is a great way to get ideas for the actual things that you want to put in the scene. So just to demonstrate, here's my very professional looking top-down layout of what I want my scene to look like. So this is going to be our graveyard. Yes, I threw this together in probably 2 minutes, but basically, I want my scene to be contained, so I'm not, rendering assets forever. So I'm going to do a cemetery wall around 3 of the areas of the scene. So basically going to make similar to a TV set. We're not going to have this 4th wall here so that our camera can be placed out here and see into it, but we will have these 3 walls to make up the back of our set, which is going to be like a large cemetery wall. We're going to have some trees and foliage, and, we probably will have some out here as well, peeking over the wall. They will be kind of floating in space, but you won't be able to see the ground back here, so it's not going to matter. But we will see the trees sort of peeking over this wall, which will add the illusion of depth. So we're going to have some trees and stuff. We're going to have individual little headstones. We'll probably have more than this, but, I'm just trying to get a rough idea of sort of the distribution. And then in the center here as our focal piece, we are going to have like a large sort of walk-in crypt or mausoleum. It'll probably be set up slightly on a hill, and we'll have like a little path going up to it. And then of course this is all going to be like grass, right? Some other plants and things. So that is the very rough idea for our scene. So let's start gathering some reference for it. So let's pop back into ArtStation here, and let's just start here. So this is a nice one. The name of the artist is going to be always up here in the top corner. Of course, I'm working from just what people have posted on their ArtStation. So credits right here, always David Harrington, very nice. So yeah, this is nice because it's more stylized, which is probably the direction we're going to go in it, just because doing realistic assets takes considerably more time, and our time is somewhat limited because, of course, we are just working for the course. But the difference between realistic and stylized assets tends to be, well, namely proportions, and then 2, just levels of detail, layering on different and more detail here. So this is sort of a like futuristic robotic thing, but I like this mausoleum kind of structure here, or maybe it's like a gravedigger's hut or something like that. But so I like this as far as like stylistically, but let's keep looking. I'm also gonna have not Pinterest, excuse me. I'm gonna have PureRef open right here, which you can download again from their website. It's totally free. So when you open a new PureRef file, you'll just get something like this. It says there's something here. We need to drag and drop it here. So the nice thing about PureRef, if you have multiple screens or a way to, I do have a secondary screen, but I'm only recording on the one, so I'm just gonna try to squish it in here. We can resize this any way we need to. But the nice thing about PureRef is that you can literally just drag and drop it without having to save it to your hard drive first. So let's continue on looking for some more concepts to give us a rough idea. This one's pretty nice. It's a lot more expansive. This is pretty orderly. It does have some storytelling elements with the little American flags, lets you know that this is an American graveyard. Let's save it. I like the moon and the mood lighting. We can try to recreate something like that in our scene. I like the sort of tree with like the moss hanging off of it, very spooky. Let's go back. So this is what I mean by like the walk-in mausoleum or the crypt. It's something like this. I don't know that I'll have the doors open necessarily, because then I would probably have to model the interior as well as the exterior. But this is kind of the idea. Big like doorway, if in like a small building with some columns and things of that nature. So let's save that one. This is a 3D scene. So ours probably will not be this large in scope because again, we are just doing what we can in the duration of the course, but this is definitely the feel we want to go for. I like this. This is an old abandoned church, but we're going to do something, it's a small chapel, so we can do something probably of this scale and have it be believably a tomb or a mausoleum of some sort. So let's save this. Less as a specific reference. I'm not really going for specific references right now. I'm going for more mood and overall vibe. So this is probably pretty good reference for the scale of what we're gonna do. This is pretty contained. And we have our little gravedigger's hut. It looks like here we have a few tombstones, we have a wall and some trees in the background, which is exactly the scale that we're gonna make. So let's save that one. I'm just grabbing anything really that catches my eye. I really like the trees in this. We can try to do some effect of like dead, spooky trees. So let's grab that one. And it's important to not limit your search terms to a single term here. You definitely want to vary your search references here to get the most results possible. So if I take away spooky and just put in graveyard, you'll see that I get completely different results here. Now this is a little bit, this tends to deviate a little bit more from like the vibe that I'm going for, but you do see some really great pieces in here that that are exactly what I want, more or less. This angel statue is pretty cool. I might not have time for something this complex in the duration of this course, but that's like a great idea for something you can add. Also, there's some variation here in the tombstones. There's these cool like crosses and Celtic crosses and different shapes. And this whole thing has a more dilapidated feel, which I kind of really like. Let's see what's up with this one. This one's a little hard to see, and it is okay if you're having a really hard time. Like it nails the vibe, absolutely. But as a reference, I'm having a hard time seeing what's going on here. So if you ever have references like this, it is totally okay for your own personal use to just bump the brightness and the contrast in a like in a Photoshop or GIMP if you don't have Photoshop. GIMP is a great free alternative. So let me just save this really quick somewhere. Richard Wright, cool. So I know where it is and what it's called. And let's open this in Photoshop. And let me just bump this brightness levels. And this is not a Photoshop tutorial, so I'm really not gonna go over what I'm doing here. And like, yeah, it's like really washed out now, but again, this is just so I can see it a little bit better. So let's just save it as a, what was it, PNG? Was it JPEG? What was it? It was a JPEG. I'm just gonna save over this file because I don't need both copies. And then from my file browser, I can also drag in to PureRef. I keep calling it Pinterest for some reason. Okay, so that's great, and I can see it a little bit better. It's got some cool, like, big tombstones in it, and it's got the chapel, which again, we're not going to do a chapel, we're probably going to do a mausoleum, but it gives you a very cool idea. The trees in the background are very nice. It's sort of set into a little valley, so this limits the sight lines here. And we have the cool, dead, spooky trees. We have the path coming up here, which is a nice feature. We also have a path in this one. So let's continue on here. Just a few more. I think you get the idea. I don't want to spend too much time on repetition in this course, but unfortunately, repetition is just sort of a feature of environment art and really any 3D art. It was cool. It shows the process of his creation here. I like this. The lighting in this is really cool because we have like the featured warm light right in the middle here and then surrounded by the cool blues, blacks, and greens. It really helps focus it. Yeah, this is great. Let's grab that one. And if we see like, this is great. This is like very detailed and way more realistic than I'm going for. It's also, you know, it's quite dark, quite foreboding, quite scary. I'm going for more of just like a fun, spooky, cartoony thing, but it does have great detail. This is more of a mausoleum than a chapel, which is featured in a lot of the pieces that we've had so far. So this can kind of inform some of our design for a mausoleum. Let's grab that. And, oh, this one's really good. Okay, last one, I swear. This is great. I like the clouds. I like the statue here. We got a lot of different examples of tombstone shapes. We got a dead tree. We got a little mausoleum. Okay, that's great. So that is probably what I'm going to use as my sort of mood and general reference. So in PureRef, you can group these things together. If you highlight all of them, you can right click, images. Oh, it's note. So sorry about that. Forgot how to use PureRef for a second. So we can group these with a note, and we can maybe move this note out, and we can now just label these. So let's call this concepts. And the nice thing about PureRef 2 is that you can drag anywhere in this. You don't have to be in this sort of lighter gray window here. You can drag stuff out here and it will just expand your canvas for you. And you can also export any of these images if you needed them on your hard drive, because right now this is the only one I saved to my hard drive because I brightened it. So none of these are saved locally on my machine. They're all sort of living in the PureRef board. But if I needed them on my machine, maybe to bring a more specific reference into Blender, I could do that. I could just click on these, save it, export. You can do the whole scene. You can do all your images. You can do selected images. So if you need like a PDF mood board of this, you can definitely do that from PureRef as well. Okay, so let's pop over to Pinterest here and see if we can get some more specific examples. I typed in spooky graveyard, but we do have a lot. We have a good chunk to work with. I mean, you can always get more, but at some point you need to move on. So This is kind of cool. We should do like maybe we could do like a gate looking in, although we didn't originally plan for a fourth wall. This is like a Halloween prop, but like the structure of it is solid. So let's grab it. It never hurts to grab a few, even if you're not going to end up using them. It's better if you think you might. It's better to just grab it and put it on your board, and end up not using it later than seeing something that you're like maybe, and then deciding that you do want to do it, coming back and realizing that you can't find it again. Let's go back to Spooky Graveyard. Again, this is like a painting, but I like the fence here, the gate, I should say, and some of the little mausoleums in the back that are a little bit smaller. We got a couple good tombstone shapes here. That's all nice and good, so let's pop that in there. I tend to err on the side of having too many references rather than not enough, because I just find it makes my life easier. Let's search more specifically, like a mausoleum. Is that all right? Yes. No, I did not. Mausoleum. Okay. So this is more what I'm thinking for the focal piece. These are great. Let me just start grabbing these. This is a more round one. I'm probably going to go with a more rectangular design just because that's what I had in my head. But if you wanted to do something like round or like octagonal, you could definitely do that as well. I just want to get a couple different types because I don't want to be sort of forced to recreate something exactly, because again, this is really cool, but I don't know what the sides look like. I don't know what the back looks like. So if I can just grab a few different references, like this one here, it's like, okay, well, maybe I like this doorway, but I want to use these arches, right? And I can do that. Got a little autosave going on. This one's great too. I don't know that we will have time to do like really detailed statues like this. We might, we'll see. Something more simple might be more appropriate just for like the sake of the course, like to do columns instead of, realistic human statues. Because if you're not super familiar with creating characters or human anatomy, this, despite the fact that it is environment art, might be a bit challenging. Like this. I like the ivy growing up. We can try to do some ivy. This is really great because it doesn't have a lot of ivy on it. So, I mean, I do like the ivy, and maybe we'll try to throw some ivy on there, but it's really helpful when you're building to know what the underlying forms are before you start covering it up with a bunch of foliage. So this is like a really clean example here, which will kind of inform. This is actually kind of perfect in size and in simplicity. We got some more complicated stuff up here, but we can probably tackle that, or change it out for something else. It's our design, so we can do whatever we want with it, really. Okay. This one's good too. It's very simple. I like the sort of moss texture that's coming down it. We got the sort of braziers here. Very simple design. So if we wanted to keep this something more cartoony, we tend to want to use larger, more simplistic forms than something like this, which has a lot of detail carved into it, which tends to make things look more realistic and less stylized. Let's see. Sometimes I like to use either like products or drawings because a lot of the work of simplifying the forms has been done for you already if you use drawings. So looking at something like this, because it's a photograph, it can be sort of messy and hard to parse what's going on with these details here. But if you use like products like this is like a miniature, or drawings, an artist basically has already done the work of simplifying it. It does allow a little bit less sort of creative freedom and less accuracy, but it can really help you understand the underlying shapes here, so I like to include them. Okay, so that's probably good. So let's grab these. I'm going to move these away because these are sort of separate from the gates that are sort of separate from the overall concepts. So let's grab those. Let's add a note to these. One thing I don't like is that it appears behind my images. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. And I like to just label these because it just makes it easier when I'm going back to model a specific piece. I can quickly find them here. When when you have like 100 images here and you're way zoomed out, it can be really hard to tell what's going on. But if you have them labeled, it's just a little bit easier. So let's search just like a tombstone, because we know we're going to need tombstones. Here, this one's great. This one has all different shapes. They're laid out in an orthographic fashion, which means they're just like straight on from the front. So honestly, I could bring this image straight into Blender and like set it as an image plane in the background and just model over it to get these shapes exactly. And we'll cover, of course, how to actually do that. These types of images are really good for that. Things that are orthographic and straight on. Let's move you off to the side. We'll come back to like the gate and the fence in a minute. Let's do the tombstones first. A lot of these are like Halloween props, but I don't care. That's fine. This is kind of cool. I like the sort of skull details. You might be able to sculpt something in, such as that. This Celtic cross one is really nice. It shows the Celtic knots in here in great detail. Of course, if we wanted to do something with the Celtic knot release, we could find some other Celtic knot images just on their own, like not part of a tombstone, vector graphics and things of that nature. So if you want to do something like that, I would include that. I'm not sure if I want to do this specific piece, but again, we're just getting as much reference as we can. Let's type in the headstone. Again, a different search term for basically the same thing will yield very different results, so make sure you're varying up these search terms and not limiting yourself to just one. I like this one. It's just sort of simple. Not every one of these smaller headstones is going to be like very detailed or eye-grabbing, because I really want the focus to be on this piece here. So I don't want to distract the eye with too many details here. This one's sort of similar, but it has sort of a taller shape. So I don't know that we need a separate reference for it, but this will remind me that I can, vary the heights and stuff to get more variation out of essentially the same model. And one more search term, gravestone. And again, very different results. Some overlap. We've seen this one before. I like this one. It's got like a nice, oh, it's a PNG. That's okay. It's got like a nice sort of ornamental carving to the top of it. This is a nice shape. Again, I'm not like focusing on what's like written on them really at all. I'm just looking at shapes and stuff. Some of these are more about the detail. Like I like this sort of, beveling carvedness to this one. That one's nice. It does look a little bit more cartoony, but that's okay. It's what we're going for. So, and this one's kind of nice. Okay, so that's probably good, at least for now. If we need to come back and gather some more references once we start modeling, we can definitely do that. So let's grab a note. And let's see, gravestones. Okay. So then we're gonna take a quick break because I'm coming up on 30 minutes on this video here. But when I come back, we're gonna finish off. We're gonna find some references for our gate that's gonna go around the cemetery here. And we're going to find some references for some trees that are a little bit more specific than the ones in our overall concept. So I will see you in the next video. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off in the last video. I apologize for having to sort of cut them up like this, but I don't really want these videos to go much over like 30-40 minutes because it's a little, you know, you start to lose focus. So we have our overall concepts, we have our mausoleum references, we have our gravestone references. So if we look at our very beautiful, very professional plan here, the last thing that we really need reference for is the fence line here and then maybe some trees. So let's crack on with that. So let me pull Pinterest back up. Again, I really like Pinterest for like the more specific references. I think if you try to search oh, no, it just took a second. So, I mean, if you try to search these more specific references in ArtStation, I mean, you will get stuff. You'll get some good stuff like this and this. But overall, people tend to post more like scenes and stuff. And so I find ArtStation's better for like complete scenes more than individual assets, although you will get some good ones. So feel free to do that. I'm just going to stick with Pinterest for right now. Maybe I'll flesh it out. So the one thing that I do want to consider with these fences is that they are essentially going to end or, you know, be the terminus of my scene here. So I don't want them to be too see-through. Otherwise, I'm going to have to do a lot of landscaping back here that I just don't have time for in this course. So I want to make them pretty tall and like brick or stone. And we can do like these little pointy spikies and stuff. We can do them at the top like this, but essentially it's going to be something like this, but like this part is going to be high, and then maybe we'll have some like wrought iron features up at the top. But I do need it to it does serve a function of blocking the camera's view of what's behind it, which is essentially going to be nothing. So a lot of these are the more wrought iron kind. So when Pinterest fails, which is rare, but it happens, we can always go and to just do a Google image search. So you see I have one here with like spooky graveyard images that I had pulled up. We didn't end up needing this because we had such great references from ArtStation, but some of these are pretty nice. I like that one. And sometimes when you use PureRef with Google, if you don't like expand it first, you'll get all this garbage. So you can just delete it. But if that bothers you, you can just expand it first, and it should not do that anymore. These are 3D models, which is really great sometimes to see how other artists have interpreted the same type of work. This is also a 3D model, so this is more what I'm going for, which is going to be like an opaque stone solid bottom and then maybe like some wrought iron top. Again, ours is going to be much taller than that though, because it has to be. The other nice thing about Google is that you can search based on an image instead of search terms. So like, I don't think I can't grab it from PureRef, but if I download one of these images, like say I wanted things that were similar to this visually, I could save one of these images. So make sure it's selected first, make sure that the highlight's there, otherwise it won't work. But let's go ahead and export this selected image. We're going to put it in our environment course, unit 1. We're going to put it there, and then let's just name it like fence. It doesn't matter. We can't drag it straight from PureRef into Google Images, but I can drag it from a folder. And now we have all these visually similar search results. So, I mean, depending what you put in here, it's going to be hit or miss, but you can see if we were looking for graveyards and we had one that we really liked, well, it's very easy to find more. Also, depending on what you're modeling, sometimes the shopping is really useful. Less so for something like this, but sometimes when you get taken to product pages, they will show you the product like from different angles as opposed to just the one that like just a normal image would be. So that can be really useful because it can show you the backside of things or the underside of things that you don't normally see in like a standard image. This is what we're going for. I think this might be the same one, but this is great because it shows like a single unit of it. Let's type in gate here because sometimes the gates are more photographed, but they can give you an idea or part of the fence will be included in it, you know. Yeah, something like these. This is in Savannah, Georgia, so that's good to know. So like if I've like, okay, I really like this because it's like a big high stone wall, well, it tells me that this is, you know, in Savannah, Georgia, so now I can just find it. I know this is probably not the most exciting video to watch, but you know, I've not really included this live in any of my previous courses, and you know, I just sort of do this off camera and then, you know, present the results. But I don't know, I was thinking it might actually be quite helpful to see the process and see how many, you know, search terms you have to try and where to go and how to do it. So you know, I apologize if this is a little bit more dry than the rest of the content, but it's a super important part, so glossing over it, it just doesn't feel right. This is what I want. Can I do that? Yeah, you can also do that. Great, good to know. Yeah, so this is much more the feel that I want. Oh, I don't want the shopping. I just want to look at the pictures. That one's good too. Okay, that's probably sufficient. We'll sort of cobble something together out of all these different types of fences and gates, and this is enough for me to go off of. Let's add a note. And let's call this like fence. And one last thing before we're done here is we want some reference for our trees and various shrubbery. So again, so this is like a lot of like Halloween decorations, which is like cool. You could, you know, you could feasibly do like these scary face trees if that's what you wanted to do. This is like gives me a good profile for like branching and twigs and sort of more gnarled trees. So let's grab that one. Again, this is like a cartoon, but it does sort of simplify the way that these branches come off. Because, like, yes, although it's a vector, you look at this and it's obviously a tree. So clearly it is communicating what it needs to communicate to be convincing. So we can sort of use this as a way to analyze sort of the simplified form of a dead or leafless tree. This is great because it's an actual photograph, which gives you more of like the feel of it without just relying on these simplified forms here. I like the simplified forms, but I don't want just those in my reference. Otherwise, my tree will likely come out looking pretty wacky if it's not based on any sort of real tree. This is great because it shows some different silhouettes, which will give me some ideas about how I can make some variations for it. And then I think I really liked in this image here, the sort of the moss hanging down here. So a couple images of like some Spanish moss might help a lot. Tends to grow on trees, grows in the south, humid areas of the US, but it gives a very like spooky effect. Oops. Again, we're probably not going to do any like water or anything, but like it does have a good sort of vibe to it. And of course I could be saving these all to like a reference board, but I just prefer to use pure ref. It's a little bit cleaner. Okay, so I mean, I think you get the idea. So this is going to be my reference board for our project. Let's add a note to our trees here. This is all I'm going to do for the moment. If I find the need to come back for more reference, I can always come back and do this as long as we save all our pure ref board. So let's go ahead and save this. Okay, so that's going to conclude our reference gathering section. So when we come back, we're going to do a brief sort of intro to Blender, how to download, how to install it, and how to use it for people that have never used it before. So if you know how to use Blender, you can probably just skip ahead to the actual blockout section. But I will see you all in the next video. Alright, so in this video we are going to quickly cover how to download and install Blender for those of you who do not have it installed already. Again, if you already have it installed, you can go ahead and just skip this video. However, at the time of the recording, the most recent version of Blender currently available is 3.3. You want to just open up a browser window and navigate to blender.org. And you'll get a page that, looks somewhat like this. The splash screen will probably be different, and the version may be different, depending on when you're watching this. But at the time of this recording, 3.3 is the latest. And if you want to know like what updates have been made, you can always click what's new, and you can, there's some stuff about what updates have been in the most recent version. Most of these updates tend to be like pretty advanced stuff, which we probably won't be utilizing a lot of this, but go ahead and download whatever version is the latest. I actually do not have 3.3 installed on my machine. I have 3.2. So I'm going to go ahead and download and install it with you guys right now. So yeah, just on the main page right here, you can go ahead and hit download. And it should automatically detect what operating your system you're using. I'm in Windows, so I have the Windows icon here. Blender does run on Mac and Linux and other things, so if you need that, they're right here. And if you need any sort of like previous versions, they're available right here for you. 2.7. So there was like a big leap in 2.8 and they changed the whole interface. So you don't have to use 3.3, but I would recommend that you use anything that's 3.0 or later. But it's just most critical that you don't use Blender 2.7 because the interface is completely different and you just won't be able to follow along with this lecture. So as long as it's over 3.0, you'll be fine. But let's download 3.3. Again, once your download's going to start right here. Blender is completely free, completely open source, so you should have no problems getting access to it. Once the downloader installs, go ahead and open it. Once you open the installer, it'll look something like this. Just go ahead and click next. This is your GNU public license. Again, you can read through this at your leisure, but Blender is completely free, completely open source, meaning anything you make with it, you can release commercially if you so choose. And that's all good. Go ahead and accept and hit next. So this is just going to ask you where you want to install it. If you have specific requirements or space limitations, you may want to move it. This is the default location. I'm going to leave it there. And all you have to do is hit install. Once that's finished, it should really only take a couple minutes, depending on your, download speeds and your computer setup. But go ahead and click finish. And what you're left with should be Blender. I'm just going to open this file location really quick. I want to just make a shortcut on my desktop, so I'm just going to hit send to desktop. Okay, I'm just going to open it from here. And once it loads up, you will get a little splash screen such as this. The first time you open any new version of Blender, you will get a quick setup. So it's just going to ask you about your settings. So language is going to be English. Shortcuts, we're going to leave at Blender. If you are coming from an older version or coming from like Maya and you want your shortcuts to be equivalent to Maya, you can change it, but I'm going to leave it at Blender because that's what I learned. And that's what we're going to be doing in this course. So I don't recommend that you change that because Blender has a lot of shortcuts and hotkeys. And if you change your key bindings, basically when I tell you to press like G to move something, if it's not G in your system, it's just going to be confusing. So leave that at Blender. We're going to select with our left. This is sort of a legacy thing. Older versions of Blender, like to select something in the viewport, you used to have to right click it, which was a little strange. But most modern programs, you select with your left mouse button. Spacebar, this is really the only thing we're going to change is the spacebar function here is for play. This will play your animation timeline if you have animations in your scene. Now, we're not going to be animating really anything, so I find it much more useful to change this to search. And that way, if I know I need a specific function in Blender, but I don't know where it is, I can just hit spacebar, pull up a search menu, and type in like, tries to quads, which will convert all of your triangle polys into quadrilateral polys, which don't worry about that if that didn't make sense. We're going to be covering all that kind of stuff. But I just find it much more useful to have the spacebar bound to search. So that's really all we're going to change. If you have a previous version installed, you can load from a previous version, but I'm just going to do it from scratch, assuming that anyone watching this may not have Blender installed. Theme, this is just cosmetic. You can change it to whatever you want. I'm going to leave it at Blender Dark because that's the default. So we're just going to save our settings. So this is the splash screen that you're going to get next time you open it, and any subsequent time. It's got your file templates, so to speak, here. You can open something. If you have worked on a file in the past with this version, your recently opened files will also appear here. Now, this is the first time I am installing Blender 3.3 on this machine, so I have nothing here except for getting started. You can also link to the manual, which has like some more like text documentation. If you need to search something specifically, you can find it there.
Hi there! Congratulations on completing this free 1-hour Blender Environments Basics course. It's a pretty great achievement, and I hope that you have enjoyed it. You are now ready to get started on using it on your own. If you would like to uncover all the hidden tips and tricks of working with Blender, head over to Skillademia.com. The Beginner to Advanced course consists of many more hours of explanations, exercises, and projects, which will turn you into a pro in no time. You'll be able to learn more about the Blender basics, scene blockout, modeling, UV unwrapping, and making and using textures. All of this while applying your knowledge on an amazing project and practicing your skills together with the instructor. If this sounds like the course for you, go check it out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.